The Tripper. I made a black-faced clown chase me through the streets. One night, I was carried into my home with a broken arm. I never told anybody what happened, not because I was embarrassed, and not because I thought they wouldn't believe me. I just thought they wouldn't understand, that I wouldn't be able to capture the fear I felt that day. But I'll try anyway. This story happened before the clown apocalypse. I went out with a group of friends to a local carnival. It had all you could imagine: Ferris wheels, cotton candy, and all the likes. It started when we were walking around the back of the circus tent. We noticed that two of our friends were missing, and we knew they were probably banging somewhere. So we'd gone over there and we found them in the forest. We were laughing our butts off and going back to the festival, passing the big tent. I remember I was starting to get a big one because one of the girls had jokingly said maybe the two of us should hide on the truck when we ran off. And the more we joked about it, the less it felt like a joke. She was staring at my lips and licking hers every now and then. She was leaning in when she spoke, till her forehead bumped my chin at some point. I was feeling her soft body up against mine, and she didn't complain when I squeezed her ass. But then I saw the clown. Like walking outside from a room with a heater, my body just went cold. He was not alone. There were other clowns around him, smiling, chatting, and all the likes as they put on their clothes. But that one was sitting on the crate, and he was not smiling. His face was painted black with blue streaks on his left cheek and red on his right, and his eyes were looking straight at mine. The girl saw where I was looking and laughed, pointing out the clown to our other friends. The clown jumped off the crate and started hopping on his feet as he came to us, speaking gibberish. He tumbled on the floor and stood up, then tripped and fell again, and a fart noise sounded. Honestly, even I laughed. I didn't know what I'd been so scared of. Besides, he probably hadn't been looking at me, but at us as a group. But then, the clown fell on his knee and proposed. He proposed to me, giving me a balloon. The others laughed and said I must say yes, and thinking it was just a joke, I said yes. He jumped up and kissed my cheeks, and honestly, that was that. We left the place after the clown gave me a green balloon, and we spent the rest of the day doing other stuff. Later, my mother called and said I should get back home, and my friends said they needed to look for a car. They always say stuff like that when they want to keep me longer, so I knew I had to walk by myself. So I set off down the road with my balloon. But as I was walking home, I felt a sudden chill on my back. I turned around to see only a bush there, and I would have walked on. But something caught my eye in the bush, a slight blue and red. I didn't even have the confirmation, but I turned and ran off, suddenly remembering where I saw that. When I glanced back, the clown burst out of the forest. I screamed my ass off. The creepy son of a gun just laughed and chased harder. Because I was running as fast as I could while looking back, I tripped on something and fell down. Only when I was on the floor did it dawn on me that I was still holding the stupid clown's balloon. I let the balloon go and staggered up, but the clown was not there anymore. Instead, there was a car coming down the road. My friends came out of the car, laughing, and I decided it was too embarrassing to let them know what happened. But then, their faces suddenly turned to horror, and they screamed, "What happened?" I didn't know what they were talking about. But then I looked down, and my hand was facing the wrong way, around mid-forearm, the bone peeking out of the skin. The bartender. I lived with a normal guy who was a clown by night. This story is either going to be the most disturbing thing you've ever heard or the most terrifying. No in between. I worked at an acoustic cafe a while back, and later at night we would have bands of these college kids and high school boys come play, each and every one of them believing they were the next big thing. Amongst these guys, I noticed there was a new one who started coming over, and honestly, he looked like he definitely did not belong there. The guy had braces on and spoke with a terrible wet lisp. He always sat alone at the corner, and he smelled neat, like clothes freshly ironed straight from the washing line. Honestly, it was pretty sad how lonely he always was, so I'd often bring him free drinks and speak to him. Once he opened up, he was a pretty chill kid. He told me about his friend, Ben, who apparently really enjoyed drinking, though he doesn't like it as much. For those wondering why such a kid would be hanging out there, well, there was a band that had been in dire need of a drummer since their last drummer hurt his hand. So Dennis, that's his name, filled that spot. He didn't really belong. They never spoke to him or laughed with him. Eventually though, the band needed a bass player, and their leader, Brian, asked me to join. So I decided why the hell not. I went to the band practice, but it was at a place that was very far away. Usually, I couldn't go back home when we were done, so I couldn't sleep there. Instead, I decided to ask Dennis if I could sleep at his apartment. At first, he didn't seem to mind, since he had a spare room. But as the days went on, it became increasingly clear that I was starting to bug him. I would go to his apartment and not get a response when I knocked, even though I knew he was definitely in there. But then he gave me a spare key so I could go in without knocking. When I did use that, he would hurry to his room as soon as I entered, and I wouldn't see him till we were out. It makes sense in hindsight, but I just didn't understand why I couldn't ever see him at night. One morning, I tried to greet him, and my mans literally ran away. I was thinking of never visiting again, but the guy blew up my phone, asking if it was something he did wrong. I told him that I worried I was bothering him, and he promised he was alright. So I took that as an invitation. Using my key, I entered his home, another night after practice. This was the last time I'd go there. It was dark inside, and there were no dishes on the sink, so he didn't have dinner. I didn't find him anywhere I looked, and I saw that his room's lights were turned off. So he was sleeping, I concluded, and I went to sleep too. I got to my bed, and that's when I heard it, a loud piercing shriek of a laugh. I sat up, not sure if I was dreaming or not, but no, the giggling continued. I left the spare room to search for the noise. It was coming from Dennis's room. When looking through the keyhole, I saw that inside, the lights were truly off. There were burnt matches, which could have been lit recently, judging from the smell, and a matches box was on the floor, with wax that could have been a candle moments ago splattered all over the table. The room was lit with a blue tint, coming from a blue light connected to the wall, but none of these things were strange, not compared to what stood in the center of the room. A clown. A clown was standing in the middle of the room, whispering, muttering, spasming, and tugging its hair. I could only make out a bit of the whispering, something like, "He is here, he is here. Ben loves people. Ben should meet him. Promised Ben he would meet him." And then stuff like, "Ben is mean, Ben is mean, Ben is mean." So this was the Ben guy that Dennis spoke of. As you could imagine, I was beyond creeped out and confused. I needed to explain to Dennis that his friend was standing in the middle of his room, dressed in a clown suit and spasming like some kind of demonic epilepsy. I hurried to my room and grabbed my phone. I thought I'd left it on the charger before sleeping, but it was actually in my jeans pants, so it took me a while to find. But I did, and I gave a call. The phone rang, but it rang from within the house. I walked out to the corridors and followed the noise. It led me to Dennis's room. Looking through the keyhole, I saw that there was the clown still standing in the room. He was holding Dennis's phone in his hand. Then it dawned on me. Dennis was Ben. At that moment, the clown looked at the phone, and as if I called his name, he turned his head straight to my direction. There he stood in the middle of the room, the blue tint tinting his body, but his face was covered in shadows. I couldn't see what facial expression he was making, but I felt it. It felt like pure rage and hatred. I went for a run immediately. I spent the whole night outside. Then I returned in the morning. Dennis was there. He asked me where I'd been with a massive plastic smile on his face. His hair was a mess, and so were his wrinkly clothes. I told him I went to do drugs and passed out. Dennis told me he was gone the whole night too, and just returned this morning. I didn't ask, then how did he know I was gone the whole night? Instead, I went to take my stuff. As I was packing, I saw that my phone had been smashed, and my clothes were cut to pieces. Something wrong? Dennis asked from the door, and I turned to see him standing there, smiling at me. I told him nothing, and I left. I have never gone there again. The Sleeper. A clown statue chased me through the circus museum when I was a kid. I was just talking to Dawn about this a week ago, and so it must be fate. When I was a boy, my family and I went to a circus museum. We never went out much when I was a child, so it was really exciting to be out with my mother and father. They were still married then. I remember I was so happy. We got corn dogs and slushies, and it was loads of fun. Oh, by the way, Don is my brother. His actual name is Levi, but he and his friends planned out a plot to steal peanut butter from the kitchen before I was born, and so my dad started calling him Don Corleone, and it kinda stuck, you see. So anyway, he was there and we were walking through the circus, seeing all these colorful caravans and pictures. But then I started getting a bit scared when we saw the old creepy pictures of strongmen and elephants. I was flat out terrified when we walked into the room with the clown statue standing in the middle. I tried to hide it and walk closer to my dad, but my eyes were on the thing the whole time. That's why I saw it. Its eyes moving. Its black eyes followed me as I walked, and I lost it. I screamed and ran to my mother. Man, Don and Dad wouldn't drop that one. Anyway, at some point through the tour, I fell asleep in my mother's arms. When I woke up, I didn't have the slightest clue where I was. It was a white-walled hallway with colorful curtains and the creepiest airy feel I had ever experienced. I called for my family, but only the echoes of my voices answered, returning with the most creepy feeling ever. I decided I couldn't handle that anymore, so I had to go look for them. I started walking through the museum, and I remembered that I was in a museum. At no point in my walk did I see a single person, and the more I walked and saw no one, the creepier things got. I was at the point of bursting into tears again when I walked into a familiar room. I recognized that room for some reason, even though it was dark now, but I just couldn't remember why. Of course, that is until I made it to the center of the room, and I remembered the clown. I turned around sharply to look at the podium of the clown, and the clown was not there. I turned around, and at the exit, the light was pouring in, blocked by the body of a clown, which grinned at me. I screamed. I turned and ran out of there as fast as I could, and I could hear it chasing me. I ran into the hallway and ran as fast as I could. Finally, I turned around a corner and ran into somebody. My brother, Don. He had been looking everywhere for me, and he asked me why I was crying. I told him about the clown, and he said there was no clown there, and to cheer me up, said he'd go there and prove it. He left and turned the corner. And then it went like this. First, I heard laughing, and then secondly, my brother appeared around the corner, white-faced, and he dashed to me. He picked me up and ran with me till we saw my parents and siblings standing where I'd been a while ago. My parents yelled at my brother for leaving me. What happened was, my mother had laid me on the bench to get to change the baby's diapers. My father had to go get the diapers in the car, and my brother left to go to the toilet with the siblings, while I was still sleeping, so he was in a lot of trouble. But my parents got very lenient with him when they noticed he was scared. My brother told me to never tell them what happened. It was quite the situation.